Hello there. Welcome to the Quadrant community call of Tuesday, November the 5th, 2024. We have some topics and we have time to talk about them. There's not much else, although I guess everybody's working hard to get Quadrant 1.0 out of here. But let's go to the topics first. Alex, you had something to say.
Well, it's that I just don't want to do the roundtable stuff because sure, do the roundtable stuff, but I would like to have like a focus thing on the 1.0 thing. So that's it. Like I see that Craig added things, I think.
Yep.
Some stuff being merged. What are we still missing? Are we all aligned on that? And are we working on the important stuff and not on some random user guide?
So we can do that in the roundtable. I added Quadrant.
Well, we can, but like let's keep it focused on that stuff. Like
Yes,
do it two-phase then.
Yeah, but you added 2 items to the topics. That is like kind of not related, or is it related?
Well, the other one, it's somewhat related.
Right.
Sorry, reading other stuff. The other one is somewhat related, and there's another thing that I want to add. I think it would be nice that people in general try to maybe get a better understanding of cell to begin with, the well-known attributes, this thing called type system, and how all that stuff works together. Because I think the data flow between things like components of Quadrant has been somewhat, I would say, confusing. Confusing people. And when I say people, I mean developers. So I think it's probably good to have a look at that. I added this request time thing as a specific one because this one, I'm looking into an issue with the Ross cell interpreter right now. We have some integration tests. But yeah, let's say integration tests failing because of it. So it's a bit annoying. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly where to take this, but hey, whatever.
Yeah.
Something's broken.
What do you want?
Sorry, what?
With this
I don't know.
topic.
You're breaking up.
I'm breaking up.
What I want is people like what I just said. Important thing is it's slightly important that everybody gets to a better understanding of what it is that we do there, because it's been creating, let's say, confusion. So that's important.
Any specific reading that makes sense there for people? I mean, or just look at that pull request, or is there some more better overview?
I don't know what works best with people. The language definition on the the language specs, maybe. That together with the well-known attributes that specify the typing of things, and what that then in turn it enables. Yeah. So request time is, sorry, yeah?
No, maybe if you have links, like add them to the doc later.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll link cell and well-known attributes to the things. So yeah, then request time again, as I said, this one's a bit annoying because we sit a bit in a crap like location right now. I think it would be great to do something about it. Maybe it'll happen pre-GA, maybe not. I don't know. I proposed something there that's really related to Authorino, but we right now also have a problem in the WASM-Shim, or not. I don't know quite yet. I did work to support the methods on time, stamps, and duration, maybe inside the Rust cell interpreter, but for some reason, when we upgrade it locally, like it breaks some of our tests. So the question is it just because of certain things that we do? Maybe we assert a little bit too much. I don't know. But we need to make sure like we haven't broken anything. If we can't upgrade that and I need to move all that stuff like I did for the strings extensions that were merged this morning. So that those methods become available. It's not the end of the world, but hey, it would be nice. That is that. But right now there's a broken promise here because you cannot use timestamps as timestamps in Authorino right now. So even if we fulfill the promise in the WASM shim, like it'll be quote unquote broken in Authorino. There is a workaround that I would not necessarily recommend people use. But if you really need it, like you can do all that, right? Just to be clear, by the way, and Guy, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any power was taken away from people. It just looks exactly as it was. But now with the way that it looks and the power of what you get with Cell, you can actually achieve something with that. I think it would have been much harder to achieve something with it. Oh yeah, actually Guy corrected me on that. Other than you falling back to Rego to sort of deal with those problems. But so yeah, so nothing's
For my
worse, it's
understanding,
better. Yeah.
for my understanding, can you like when would you need a timestamp in this flow of how would people use that? I'm just curious.
I don't know. You want to authenticate people differently after 5 p.m.
Right. Okay. I was thinking that, but okay, something like that. Okay. Okay.
on weekdays. And I can go on like this. Like I don't know what people do with their time. Sorry, with time is what I mean.
So
Right. So
Alex,
that same would also be true for rate limiting then. For
No,
it would be
that's
valid for both rate limiting and auth. I mean,
I'm confused. What is the question?
well, if I want to do certain thing at a certain time, that could apply to any policy.
Hmm. Yes. So if you're fundamentally asking, yes, time is time. So if you want to do something on weekdays, like blah, 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 but my wording was maybe more precise than you may have realized. I said something different in the auth. So something that needs to be evaluated in Authorino with regards to time. If you do it so that this auth config should only be applied after 5 p.m., that gets resolved in WASM. So we will not be calling Authorino until 5 p.m., for instance, right? So it would work. And so now the fact that you bring it rate limiting in there, the question becomes again, I guess the question is, who gets to evaluate this expression? And we tried hard to have the semantics to be the same across auth and rate limiting. I'm saying this on purpose now because I'm not saying Authorino or limitador or whatever. I'm saying we tried hard to have those semantics be the same across all our policies so that people wouldn't have to concern themselves with the long-winded answer that I just gave. But so that's the broken promise effectively right now with regards to time. I don't know if I clarified this at all.
And when it comes to a solution, we might go with the next, like after quadrant 1.0, or maybe
Well,
we can
I
have
don't know.
something.
Like I can start working on this as soon as I figured the other thing out, though. It's not, again, there is no API per se changes needed, whatever, right? You will like, it's just certain use cases right now will not be as well covered as what we hope for. I think that's the best way I can put this. So if you really need to, so then when the fix comes in, that I mean is up for debate, and then who would again like have that very use case, right? We're talking about a cell expression that needs to be evaluated in Authorino. Like maybe you can, depending on the use case, maybe we can do it slightly differently so that it's not evaluated over there. As the person to write two auth config instead of one, right? And solve the problem in a different quote unquote creative way. And then eventually like it'll be fixed and beautiful.
And again, for me to understand, if somebody would use a date as a cell expression right now in their policy, like to choose between two different behaviors, would that work or not?
No.
Right.
Well, again, like your wording is okay. In an OS config, it would not work out of the
Right.
box in the way that they expect, but there are ways to making it work nonetheless.
If I write it in the I'm talking about the policy, not about the config. Like
Yeah, but
if I write,
that's where I
that's not
can't answer the question because I need to know precisely where that expression would
right.
be resolved.
If it makes it all the way to the auth config, there's a problem.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, may I try it with the different words, just in case still people are not following the conversation here? Is Alex is 100% right on everything that he said, right? But only to clarify, in case it wasn't still, there are multiple ways of representing time, right? So you can represent time as a string, right? And there are RFCs, that try to standardize, how you represent all the parts of a date and time, right? With multiple levels of precision, including. But it can also represent time using numbers, like float numbers, for example, right? Authorino, the way it paused, from the external authorization requests, the only piece of data that was meant to be treated as a timestamp data went in the past with this representation that you see on the very top of the screen there, right? As a pair of two number values, right? Where one of them is the number of seconds since the 1st of January of 1970, which is known in the Linux world as the epoch time, right? And the other one is the number of nanoseconds within the day, right? So by adding up those two, you can get to the precision of nanos of a given date time represented as a pair of numbers, right? Since we introduced cell, right, what is called timestamp might induce a different expectation on the user, right? The user might expect time to represent in some other way. And an experienced cell user would also expect, the multiple functions for dealing with the timestamps in cell to also work right on those so-called timestamp typed values that we support, right? But that would generate a problem, right? Right now we support the old way, the legacy way of representing conditions in Arduino alongside with the new way in cell, right? Both side by side. So how could we call the same thing, give it different treatments for that, right? For example, that variable called request.time, how could we treat it as a pair of numbers when you write a former Arduino condition and then treat it as a proper cell timestamp type when you write a predicate in cell, right? So in order to make it consistent, we made the cell interpreter to also parse that data type in the same way that Arduino used to interpret it in the past, right? But that limits the number of things that one can do, with that timestamp value in cell, at least, right? In Arduino, that was never a big problem because we have OPA. So for some use cases, you could still use OPA, to convert from epoch time into proper date time and extract parts of that date time data, such as the hour within the day, like to implement authorization rules under that condition that Alex has exemplified, right after 5 p.m., for example, right? But with cell, we would expect to do not only that but more, right? Because that would not be limited only to OPA, right? You can actually use cell in an alt config all over to write conditions for authentication as well, not only for authorization and this kind of stuff, right? So right now we are not delivering anything less than before. So if anything, we're delivering more than we had before, right? You can still try to do some math on top of that particular representation of timestamp in cell. And that is the thing that Alex said that he would probably not recommend, right? Because it is cumbersome, right? And it's not what an experienced cell user would expect. But you can do that, right? And that is for Arduino, right? Within the WASM shim, it's a different world, right? When those conditions are interpreted parts in the WASM shim, we have no restriction on parsing that in the former way that Arduino used to do, right? Because why would we, right? We can parse that as a proper cell data type, right? And enable all the power that cell gives for a timestamp data type. So I think the discussion is how we want to treat this, supposedly as a proper cell timestamp. And if we do that in the WASM shim, I suppose that we also want the same treatment inside of Arduino, right? At the same time, we're not ready to remove all that legacy data types inside of Arduino, right? And now I'm heading already, and this is basically saying exactly the same thing that Alex said with different words, I guess, right? And now I'm trying to progress to some conclusion here, right? And to that, I actually have a question. Is timestamp the only data type that we have this kind of problem between cell and how the data type is treated inside of Arduino?
I guess you're asking me, right? I think yes. The other one we could have, but I don't think it's the thing within Arduino is duration. That's not a thing, as far as I know, right? Like it relates somewhat to my comment down there because, like the very last one on that page, Thomas, if you mind scrolling. I didn't cover that one, but so yeah, so this expression there maybe doesn't really make sense, but I made it so that I'm doing this whole thing. All that works, right, internally inside of Arduino, right? Well, that could be an expression inside Arduino. So it works, it's going to do the proper thing, right? You take a timestamp, you take a duration, you add that to the timestamp, you get a new timestamp out of there, right? It's as soon as you leave the interpreter that things become interesting, and more so when you leave Arduino. And yeah, the question becomes, what should it be, right? So, and the same applies, I think RFC 339 also has duration covered. Plus we have duration in Gateway API as well. So if you're asking on how to represent things outside, I think from a cell perspective, the proper way to represent those things is what you see there, i.e. an RFC 3339 date literal would be the way, the spec way to do that when you move to JSON.
Right. Yeah. Well, the only reason why request.time is set to be a timestamp was because we decided that way, right? We could have decided otherwise. We could have come up with our own data type and said, hey, this is not a timestamp, this is a quadrant timestamp, however we want to call it, right? Maybe even given some more properties to it, such as some built-in conversion between those different ways of representing time, right? And by saying that, I think what I really want to say is that we can redefine it, right? We can define it however we want. So because of how the number of things we could do with an Arduino timestamp, right, before cell was quite limited unless you were using OPA. I would even go, would even be okay with a breaking change, right? And actually keeping the same well-known attributes, but changing the types of them, right? I think that's somewhat acceptable, right? But if that's the only one, let's say that's the only one, you're already listing some others, but if that were the only one, then maybe why break it? We could just introduce another one, right? with a different name and say, hey, this is the way you get it in seconds plus nano. This is the way that you get it as a proper RFC 3339, right? But the number of well-known attributes is like too many. Then maybe it's the easiest thing to do is just redefine the types as the way they should be. And because in Altarino, it's not like you can do too much, with those numbers anyway before cell. So be it.
I think the underlying thing that you have for it is what I have in there, right? Because I say define them as proto, right? So that they're aligned everywhere, right? That problem solved. Then because I say that, then whether you want to make it like a proto timestamp or some other timestamp or whatever, provide the utility function so that you can have them go to one type to another. For some of them with the proto one, again, it's covered already, but you could do it for other things, right, as we see fit. So yes, absolutely. So that's why I think, but again, I think to step back, like what's important is that maybe sort of we all align on how, I guess what Thomas was asking, sorry to pick on you, Thomas, but the questions you were asking to me is literally a reflection of how the data flow and so forth isn't clear. And to some extent, it's good in the sense that I don't think the user should concern themselves with that stuff, right? They should just be able to express what they're trying to express. And then this thing works wherever it needs to run, right? Nobody cares about that. That's an implementation detail. But with that being said, I think developers working on that, it's important that we all understand what this means and how this is supposed to work. And that's been a recurring hiccup. But yeah, anyways.
Yes. Another question: is it also true that like we'll always need to have some processing at the WASM layer and some in Authorino, depending on how the conditions are, or is that not true? Or is that a wrong question to ask?
I was going to say my question would be, why does it matter?
Well, I can imagine the way you solve it affects that. Like you can solve it in a different way.
Okay, then my answer is I wouldn't make any bet on any of what the answer is to that question, and I would find a way that is the least constraining possible, right? So that whatever we need to do, right? If we want to evaluate cell and limitador, which today we don't need doing, but if we would want to, like why would we not be able to, right? And then that, again, if you do that, raises interesting question as regard to how data flows between whomever calls limitador and how limitador understands the payload that comes over. That's what I call the data flow, right? Because it's all Kubernetes in the end or whatever. It's all strings.
Anybody else wants to ask a question or say this is bullshit?
Mine is more of a timing question. So I think I see what I did there, right? I think I understand, but I guess my question is, if nothing is any worse, is it something that needs to be solved at this point? Or is it something that we're talking about solving in the future?
At this point, the answer is definitely no. If somebody in the end thinks that's a blocker for GA, that's for somebody with an actual use case.
No,
something, right?
That's the answer I expected. I was just double checking.
No, and then let's move forward.
I guess the other part would be, is it worth documenting that there is this difference between?
Honestly, I think if I would do one thing, is actually very much the opposite. I would not document request time. I would take it out. No, from the doc, just to be really clear about what I'm saying. Take it out so that it's not documented, but it's there. You can do stuff with it, but then you need to understand more.
Yeah, but it's there, so someone's going to use it. So it'll be extremely useful for them if they're going to use it to know how to use it and what the limitations are.
I want to hear Iggy's take on that.
Yeah, I kind of have a different opinion than yours, Alex. I would keep it. Fine. As I said before, even if it's not ideal, but one can still use it in some ways, right? For example, with the examples we currently have in OPA. So where we do have functions that convert from epoch time, to the RFC format, for example. And so I would keep it, even if that comes with the cost of later on having to redefine it and present it as a breaking change.
Okay, so how would you answer Craig's question? Like, what does it mean in terms of dog? Do we put an asterisk there and says, hey, this is represented differently in Authorino and then elsewhere, and you deal with it? Or we don't do that. We make it that it looks exactly like what it looks like in Authorino in WASM, because that's also an option. Like, we
Yeah.
own that stack, right? We can do whatever we want. So what is it we do? Like, if it's just documentation, nothing has to happen now. If it's more than that, then somebody needs to make a call.
Like, I wonder if we document the least possible that you can do and don't go beyond that. And then when we add in additional behavior later on, when we bring things into alignment, that documentation can be updated to express the increased amount of things that you can now do.
Yeah, I think it's not. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Whatever. I don't know, but I don't think that there is no intersection in that set right now. All right. Just to be clear. Request the time when it's a timestamp and request that time when it's a map of two number values that are floating points are like, I mean, you can imagine, right? There is no intersection between the two types.
Okay, so then what if we just say request.time is not supported right now? You can't, if you use it, you're here with dragons.
Looks like exactly what I proposed. So I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, you're still documenting it, right? It's like we know it's here, but we
Okay.
don't support you using it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Works.
Okay, let's move on. Just like time is moving on.
Thomas, I don't really understand how we ended up moving past the V1 bits.
I don't know. I don't know. I guess I misunderstood. I didn't
Thomas
know.
wants to
Like,
do that during the roundtable. That's
it took
how
me
we
for
have
5 minutes to understand that Alex jumped to the bullet.
Okay.
This is okay. It's okay. Because okay, now I understand it because he understood me saying that let's talk about 1.0 in the roundtable. So let's go to the roundtable 1.0 or whatever, and talk about it. We can do a round.
So what we can say right now is DNS and
Mhm.
TLS v1 is open and almost ready to merge. We're just waiting for the last rebase test to pass. Sales 3.0 preview is merged. I think what we need to understand is what's preventing rate limit policy and auth policy from becoming V1 at this stage or opening those PRs. I don't have the answer, so somebody else is going to have to. Yeah, go Gus.
I don't have the answer as well, neither. But what I do is that I'm working on a PR which is changing the API in V1 Beta 3. We call it finalize V1 Beta 3, so should be the last thing we change from the API perspective. So then maybe we can promote to V1, but I don't know what's missing after that PR. Yes, Keith.
Yeah, that one and Adams, right, which is similar to the auth policy.
Yes, very right. And also there is another issue which is implementing the. No, that's not related to the API. It's implementation detail. Nothing.
Okay, so we have two PRs that we're waiting to merge, and then we can move to V1, is what I'm kind of summarizing that as.
Well, though arguably the question, I think the way that I understood your question is why are we going to V1 beta 3 to begin with?
That was going to be my next question.
Right.
If we're moving almost immediately to V1, why not just skip the V1 beta 3? Is there value in the V1 beta 3 at this stage? Like we're a week or so away?
At least for me, there is no big value in having a release with V1 beta 3.
Okay.
What I'm not going to do in my PR is to promote him to V1. I prefer to split the work in two different PRs. One for this, and then another one like the one that Mike is doing for TLS and DNS policies.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So the work you're doing that also has the V1 beta 3 change in it, we remove the V1 beta 3 change, just do the piece of work that the other piece of work, I'm not sure what that is, sorry. And then we open a separate PR that moves off policy and related policy to V1 or two PRs, whichever works best. And then test pass merge, right? Like, okay, so is there eyes on your, so I guess that's on you then, Kuski, unfortunately, is like to separate that out now. And then we merge that one, right? And then we can open a V1 PR. Am I summarizing that correctly now?
I'm okay with that. I mean, it's one PR open by Adam regarding the auth
Adam
policy.
Adam, yes.
Yeah. Another one that I'm working on, there is a draft PR already there, which is not finished yet.
A different question, I suppose. Are these PRs actually impacting the API, or
Yep.
They are? Okay.
Both of them, yep. And Adams has just been approved.
Okay.
I left some comments on Adams, so they were not requests for changes, but they were some comments. I would like to clarify because they affect my PR. It's the same thing. I have the same question, so.
So it sounds like we're pretty close. In the next couple of days, basically, next day or two, we should be able to have V1 of the APIs merged into main. It would seem. And then we can cut, like, I guess once those emerge, we can probably just go with RC1 at that point. Okay. So let's shout loudly once those PRs are open, so that people can go and look at all the find and replaces that we did, and merge them as soon as possible.
Yes.
Which brings me to then the other question. You think we could tag 1.0 this week, end of this week?
RC1, yeah, it seems that way.
So we're going to be RC1 still during KubeCon, but that would be okay. Or not.
Yep.
Right. And I was making notes, but I didn't really get the solution. Like in the end, the answer to the question skip V1 beta 3 was yes or no?
You skip it, yeah. What's your concern with it being RC1 during KubeCon?
I'm sorry, Greg. What do you mean by skip V1 beta 1? Meaning it's not be in GA, right?
V1 beta 3?
Yeah. But I mean, the changes we are doing right now, targeting V1 beta 3, we're not going to redo them because they haven't been merged yet, right? Let's merge it, and then we just rewrite V1 beta 3 as V1 and in a separate PR.
Whichever is the least amount of work, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we all agree on that. Okay. Okay. No, I don't really mind. If it would not be a release candidate, would even be nicer. But like, I get that it should be a release candidate, especially because it's 1.0. We cannot just say, well, let's skip release candidate here, and so that makes sense to me.
I mean, it's, yeah, I suppose ideally you could say it was V1 at KubeCon, but we're not a million miles away at this stage, hopefully.
Okay.
I don't
Is there
think it'll
anything
put anybody off. Do you know what I mean?
No.
If you're interested in this project and you see there's a V1 RC1 in place, then like you're going to follow that until it goes to V1, right? It's not like you'll be like, oh well, I'm not going to bother now.
True. No, I think it's acceptable. Is there anything else that we are possibly forgetting now? We're not talking about.
No, probably about 400 things.
Right.
It should be a fun couple of weeks anyway.
Envoy Gateway is still working, right? It's not affected by all this last change that we test that.
There's a question out of the blue. I don't know. Aguski. Don't know if you know.
I don't expect any issue.
Okay.
I mean, we are running tests on
Right.
Gateway on
Yes.
every single. Now, I don't know if you know, just for awareness, since we merged the onboarding of the sale operator, we by default on our testing on development environments, or by default the Istio is being installed with the sale operator, and for integration tests we're running in CI. We're running integration tests specifically for Istio resources using sale and Istio control. We're running with Envoy Gateway as well, and also all the controllers end-to-end tests. We also run on all these 3 matrix entries, which is Istio with sale operator, Istio with Istio control, and Envoy Gateway. So this is our safety net. So if anything goes out of that, or if anything breaks, we should catch using those tests. If not, we are missing some, or we have some hole in the net. That could also happen as well.
Right, the scope is seriously narrowed, I would say, at this stage. Like I know with the DNS stuff, we're mostly just fixing small bugs or making small improvements to what's there behind the API, and building out a test that will run through DNS policy with 20 different DNS operators operating against the same zone. We have that run on every single PR in the DNS operator itself with DNS record, but we want to actually execute it right through the stack as well. So things like that are starting to be worked on. And docs, starting to build out the docs for the use cases and things like that. So yeah, the actual, I guess, code changes are starting to narrow fairly rapidly, I would say.
Yeah, I guess it's also true that there are some, like, we're behind with the docs related to state of the world, for example, or not.
We are definitely behind on doc. We're definitely behind in general.
Yeah. Yeah, but like some docs lacking might be another reason to also not have it, to have it a release candidate.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do want to, I think part of this, I do want to acknowledge the Herculean work that's been done by people on this team. It's been massive. It's a little bit scary how much things have changed in the last, I don't know, when did we come over to Barcelona? I don't know, 6 months, whatever it was. It's amazing how much work has been done. So it's cool to see it come together. So I'm excited. I'm excited to start seeing all the bugs come out and fix those. But yeah, it's like the huge amount of work that's been done.
Anybody else wants to put something on the table? Then, if not, maybe two things to say. Next week, he will be participating in KubeCon, presenting the maintainers track, and possibly at the Contributor Summit. So good luck with that, Guy. Hope the US will be okay. Right after this call, there's the Gateway API call, if you have time and energy to attend that one. And I think that's all. Unless there are any last questions, remarks, or anything, then thank you, everybody. See you
Christmas, yeah.
next week.